Could I get directors to take their seats, please? Welcome back, everyone. Ms. Ferguson, I think we're on number 3 on our agenda, are we not?
Yes, we are, Chair. Adoption of the minutes for Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of April 16, 2025.
We've got 3 sets of minutes. Is there any reason why we can't adopt all 3 of those at once?
Sure.
Could I have them moved as a block? Moved. Seconded. Let's just do a quick count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have quorum. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. That brings us to public input period. Public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that are or have been subject of a public hearing. Input from the community is valued and appreciated. We request that input is presented in a friendly and respectful manner. Your cooperation in maintaining a safe, respectful, and orderly environment is greatly appreciated. And now I would welcome anyone that would like to provide input to committee to come forward, please. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow directors. My name is Susan Kaufman, and I'm from Statlam. I would like to comment on items, I believe, R6 and 7, bylaw enforcement. I fully support our bylaw enforcement department and the good work that they do. I was particularly thankful to see the nuisance properties portion of the proposed amendments in there. I would request, though, that the bylaw enforcement staff be given proactive powers and not just be subjected to a resident-based complaint. The residents don't want to be de facto bylaw enforcement. It puts us in a hard position if it's your neighbor that has these unsafe and unsightly premises. The derelict buildings portion, I'm concerned about just putting a fence around it, and I would like to see that if it is a safety issue, and a lot of times they're older buildings, so it could involve hazardous materials too, that a timeline be attached to when these buildings are safely demolished and removed from the properties. There's been several ones. The ones that come to mind for me actually are in the municipality of North Cowichan, but they were used by squatters and subject to several fires before ultimately they were just burnt, and there was no safe removal of potentially hazardous materials. So yeah, that's just what I would like to add to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Would anyone else like to provide comment to the committee today on any of the items before us? Should note that we have a number of items that will have people, applicants present, and maybe, I don't know if we've got anyone online. For those that have an item before us, presented by staff, the procedure will be Staff will present their report. We will engage in questions with staff. After the questions to staff have been completed, we'll give the applicants an opportunity to add anything if they are so inclined, and perhaps take a question or two from directors before we consider the item. Once the item is on the floor, we won't be taking any further input from applicants or staff. So with that, we would go to, is there anyone else that'd like to provide input? Going on? Excellent. Then the next we go to is correspondence, Ms. Ferguson. I think for the purposes of these, we have 4 grants and aid. We have a grant and aid for Area C, Cobble Hill, Shawnigan Cobble Hill Farmers Institute and Agricultural Society, Cowichan, Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora for the Duncan Chamber of Commerce, Area I, Yubo Mead Creek, Cowichan Lady of the Lake Society, and Area I, Yubo Mead Creek, Cowichan Green Community. Would anyone like to move those items as a block? We have a mover and a seconder. Does anyone have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. For everybody's information, those items will go to the next board meeting on Wednesday, May the 14th, 2025. That takes us to information. We have 3 information items. Oh, I think we should maybe do the first 2. There may be some discussion on IN3. So we've got a couple of information. Any discussion on IN1? Seeing none, any discussion on IN2? Lastly, IN3, Union and BC Municipalities UBCM resolution deadline. Ms. Miles Wilson, did you want to make a remark on that?
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item, we received notice that the resolution deadline for the UBCM convention, which comes up annually every September, is upon us and is in June. And so currently right now, as the process unfolds, they're getting a bit of a hailstorm, as they put it, of resolutions coming through the local area associations. And just to remind the committee that there were 3 that we had submitted through the AVICC that were all endorsed at that convention. So the topics were regarding private managed forest lands, active transportation, and funding to support Indigenous engagement in land use processes. And so those will be moving forwards to the UBCM. To reflect on your advocacy section in your strategic plan, there are a number of topics in there. Most of them touch on the 3 resolutions that you've already moved through the system. But we wanted to put this on the agenda to receive any direction if there's other issues that you wanted to potentially move forwards for resolutions to the UBCM.
Thank you for that. I think it's important, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, because as electoral areas, we may have items that are unique to the electoral areas that we may want to advance. Like you say, we have put 3 forward through AVICC, which is an appropriate route to go. I would ask if there is anything that's of an urgent nature. It does take a little while to craft a resolution to get the appropriate background material and rationale together. So if anyone has any items, then we should be making sure that staff is made aware of them so that they can be put forward to the board. Director Nicholson, hang on. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm just reflecting on the note I think probably all of us got from Terry Young regarding transit, and the fact that we're 2 months into a strike and it's really having a big impact on the community. And we have pretty inadequate service anyway. And so then when it goes on strike, it's just really, I think, killing the people who depend on it. So I don't understand why it isn't considered an essential service to get people who need transit to get to work. Terry Young suggests that maybe it shouldn't be a for-profit company that we're contracting with, but I'm wondering if UBCM is a place to raise, and I haven't done any research and I don't know whether this is, has been done before or not, but I do think it's something that we should think about for UBCM, and probably we could talk about it at committee of the whole, because it's more of a regional service, I guess, when I think about it.
Well, it's certainly a regional service, but I think the impact in rural areas is profound, and I think there's other opportunities for people to get around. But you know, I certainly hear what you're saying. I know that the members of my community that are basically just stuck, can't get to work, can't get to the doctors, can't get in for shopping, and so I turn to Ms. Miles Wilson. Are we, like, this is something that we couldn't really have foreseen at EVICC, not really, like, I would call it an emergency, but is there maybe the route through UBCM, is that a path, or is there perhaps a way where we could pass a resolution requesting an emergency meeting with the minister responsible to perhaps investigate and intervene on behalf of the community members that need the service so badly? Any thoughts on this item?
Yeah, so just a reminder, as we know, the convention's in September, and we all hope and feel confident that they'll have a resolution well in advance of the convention. And so the item in front of us today is regarding resolutions. If there's alternative advocacy the board wants to seek on the pending or the ongoing strike, that's a kind of a secondary issue. I would say that I would potentially refer it back to staff to come forwards would be a good option.
I got Director Abbott first.
Thank you, Chair. I just sat in on a coastal marine strategy to talk about derelict boats. And the cities of Langford and Port Moody are actively pursuing initiatives at UBCM to deal with this. And I'm wondering to at least pressure the province to become more engaged. If you've got shoreline, as some of my fellow directors have, it's only a matter of time before a derelict boat ends up on your shoreline. At present, in the village of Cowichan Bay, we've got 3 glass boats and a steel trawler. It's just one storm away from becoming an increased challenge. And of course, it's washing up on the delicate marshlands, the eelgrass, and where First Nations are trying to redevelop an active agricultural scene. So I would defer to staff to see if we can't get help crafting something to add emphasis to other municipal initiatives. And in chatting with the mayor of Ladysmith as she left the building this morning, her eyes are just watering over how many derelict vessels are challenging their community. So perhaps a CVRD initiative to just add more emphasis, if that's appropriate.
Red is good, go.
Yes, that is a topic that potentially could be a good a resolution, and I would just link it to the upcoming trip to Ottawa for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, because the funding for cleanup is federal and Transport Canada, and it's the abandoned vessels program that needs to be refunded. And but not to say that engaging with the province around environmental issues that are being created isn't a worthy advocacy cause as well. But I think it's now that we're traveling east in a few weeks' time, we could probably double up on the advocacy.
Yeah, and I'd suggest that there has been significant amount of work done in this area, and I would just suggest a brief search of some of the UBCM archives and the likes, and I'm having a vague recollection that the CVRD has actually already submitted a shoreline derelict vessels resolution in the past. So what would you say would be an appropriate, like, drop dead date for getting suggested topics forward for resolution submission? Be Ms. Miles Wilson. Oh, shoot, hang on. There you go.
So thank you for the question. And so if the deadline is noted as June 15th, we need to develop the resolution and then staff would develop the background required to support it, of course. I would propose that I've just noted the topic of abandoned vessels and shoreline cleanup. And within a week's time, it would be helpful because we should put this topic as well on the committee of the whole agenda. And since we've canceled the 28th meeting, we should really make sure that we're clear on what we're advancing so staff have at least 2 weeks to prepare the material to submit on time. So I'd say within the next week, potentially just let me know, and then we will prepare a summary for committee of the whole, and then we can work it through the system.
Great. Anyone else? Director Nicholson?
So it's not appropriate to make a motion right now to ask staff for a report on the transit issue?
Ms. Miles Wilson?
Yeah, so I would say refer the issue to staff to come forward with a report would be appropriate, yep.
So could I make a referral motion to staff to come forward with a report on
Options.
options
Yeah.
for addressing the transit strike issue for UBCM?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. We need a little bit more concise wording. It's not a referral motion that, do we have to recommend it to the board for action? Recommend to the board that a report on the current transit strike issue be prepared and presented at the next EASC? Well, I'm just trying to make sure that we don't have language in there that we take a short break and craft something and come back. Got 4 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. It has been noted to me that the item that we're about to consider should normally be considered under a new business item, but we're just going to go ahead and proceed with the resolution that's been crafted. Ms. Ferguson, could you read out the resolution that's being proposed?
Thank you, Chair. The resolution is that it be recommended to the board that staff report on the current advocacy options to support the reliable transit service, and that it be presented at the next EASC.
Moved. Seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. That takes us to R1, and I'm just going to set the table here a little bit by saying it looks like we have 10 staff reports. And we want to make sure that everybody gets home at a reasonable time this evening, so let's be succinct. Ms. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very best to be succinct. So this application was first brought before the committee on April 16th of this year, where it was referred back to staff to have further discussions with the applicant about the possibility of co-location on the existing TELUS tower at 2965 Boys Road. The applicant has provided an additional rationale, which is in attachment B of the staff report. Next, I can't see anything here. Next slide, please. So during that meeting, there were also discussions around the need for the proposed tower height and the views from the Eagle Heights neighborhood. These photos here were taken from the driveway of the proposed location of the tower, and is looking towards the Eagle Heights neighborhood. So this shows a fairly significant steep slope. Cellular signal is blocked or weakened by steep slopes, and therefore needs to be designed to reach over those. So that's how they design it, with those terrain conditions in mind. And next slide, please. And these two photos show views from the cul-de-sacs in the Eagle Heights neighborhood that would overlook the general area, one being on Phillips Road and one is at the end of Dogwood Road. Yeah, that's right. It's also staff's understanding that the Rogers is proposing a transparent lattice tower design to minimize view impacts, which is noted in the staff report as well. And the applicant, I believe, is online, Brian Gregg, who can provide hopefully he's online. He was having some issues, so with WebEx, hopefully he's still there. So hopefully he'll be able to help you with any additional questions should you have any.
So thank you, Ms. Woods. First, we'll go to questions for staff. And anyone have any questions for staff on this? As noted, we've seen this before. Let's come back. Director Nicholson, question for staff.
Can you remind me, if we don't vote for concurrence, what does that mean?
Ms. Woods.
So through the chair to Director Nicholson, it is ultimately the, oh gosh, let me get this right, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, who makes the ultimate decision on these. They do take local government recommendations into consideration when doing that. Not being the decision maker, I can't say what would happen at the end of the road there, but I do know that they do take local government's recommendations into consideration.
So that means it would still move forward just without our concurrence.
Through the chair, I can't comment for sure if it would move forward or if it would be stalled.
Does that conclude your remarks?
Yes, thank you.
Director Acton.
I have a few questions.
How about you start with two?
Okay, I'll do three. I'll take one of yours.
Two. Go for it.
I guess, like, so I was in the States and, you know, they make a real effort of trying to make things look nicer. And so I drove down there on our large break there today to take a look. And there's already a really ugly cell tower there. And so, and it's kind of short. So I don't understand why we can't just make it taller and use the top part for this application. And then the other thing is they're making cell towers look like trees, and like, because that whole area, it's kind of industrial looking, and there's parts of it that look a little shabby, or however you want to say it. But it's becoming, as the city grows, it becomes more areas that people are going to live and live more and have more of a mixed use. So I think we're moving towards how do we create these mixed use areas and make them actually look nicer instead of uglier.
Through the chair, I will do my best to maybe answer both questions with one answer. So we do, as staff, review these applications in line with the telecommunication antenna structure policy. So if you are looking for things that would be more tree-like, which I have seen as well, and I did look into when looking through this application, that would be the more appropriate place to sort of put those design guidelines. When assessing this particular proposal, through the design guidelines, it did conform with the majority of guidelines there, but that would be where we would look as staff for more direction towards how we want these things to look in the future.
Go ahead.
I've heard that response a lot.
You turn your mic off. Okay.
Response a lot in our community, like, oh, it should have been written better, and it should have been, you know, too bad, so sad. And not that that's your response. I know you have to follow what's written, but couldn't we, like, even just request those kind of things, like, so that companies kind of just do what's right instead of us having to have some policy around it? Can't we just make a request and?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Acton. I mean, you can put conditions on statement of concurrence. So you could say with this added, that it looked like a tree. I forget what they're called. There's an actual name for them. But yeah, that would be sort of your decision whether you wanted to add that to the recommendation for the letter of concurrence. I don't know if Ms. Chair or Ms. Pressman have anything else to add? Or the applicant, yeah.
Well, hang on. We'll get to the applicant when it's the applicant's turn. Director Abbott.
I may be asking staff a question that the agent or the applicant, Mr. Gregg, should be answering. And I read the agent's response about co-locating, and it's just not structurally sound, as are many of the towers. Yet every time we see an application, there's an expectation that co-location is supposed to be possible. So my question is, can we not require and expect that a new tower can hold up to at least 2 future applicants, so that we don't get towers that are incapable of holding more than one provider's equipment?
So
And perhaps an engineering sign-off that the proposal is capable of weathering the weight of current technology for up to 3 providers.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here and direct everyone to the fact that we've got the applicant online here. What you're asking is a policy question around a policy that we already have on the books. So I'm more than happy to entertain a resolution following the consideration of this item on that specific thing and design, and we can do all of those things. But right now before us, we have a specific request that we need to deal with. So do you have a question for staff beyond that? Okay, thank you. We have any further questions for staff on the item before us? Thank you, Ms. Woods. Mr. Gregg, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, there was a lot there. Well, I guess I'll try to keep it brief and certainly welcome any further questions. But my first comment would be, we get this feedback all the time around co-location, and in principle, it's a great idea. It's the first thing we always try to do, is see if there's existing structures that we can co-locate on while still delivering the needed coverage objectives. I guess the trade-off, and this relates to the policy comment there, is in order to have towers be structurally sufficient and tall enough to provide coverage for 2 or 3 entities, what ends up happening, the trade-off, is you need much bigger towers. So each tower needs to be sort of overbuilt, if you will, to essentially each carrier adds another 10 meters to the tower above the tree line. So, average tree heights in the Cowichan Valley can range, or mature tree heights rather, you can go above 40 meters. And all the antennas have to be above that. And then you have each carrier with about a 10-meter stack at the top of the tower above that. So if you wanted to have a tower that could handle 2 or 3 carriers, suddenly you have, instead of a 40 to 50 meter tall tower, a 60 or a 70 meter tall tower. That might be good forward thinking, but by the same token, we always or often get pushback if our towers are too tall and then deemed to be sort of unsightly and not in keeping with the aesthetic of an area. So I think it's context specific. Sometimes it might be preferable to have a smaller number of taller towers. In other cases, it might be better to have more towers that are smaller, so that they blend in better with the area. So that'd be sort of my only feedback. There's a trade-off there, and I know I kind of addressed this, but I guess the other aspect of it is, do we kind of speculatively build taller towers for the hypothetical scenario that a third party might want to share it one day in the future? It's not always the case that each company has the same objectives or network design. So that's the other risk, is you end up building taller towers, and then what if nobody wants to share it? Then you have this bigger tower that you didn't really need. So I think that for those reasons, we end up sometimes getting pushed to building more reasonably sized towers that suit the need of the day. I won't go on further about why co-locating on the TELUS tower didn't work out. It's all in the letter attached to your report. But I could suffice it to say we did look into that, and if it was viable, we certainly would have done it. I guess my final comment that I should address is we do tend to stay away from making the towers look like trees. I've only seen that a handful of times in Canada. The reason is they're very difficult to upgrade with technologies over the year. while still having them look like a tree. Because as you know, we routinely go back and swap out antenna models and add antennas and remove antennas. The other thing is that I've noticed is our towers are taller than natural trees. And so those artificial trees tend to draw a lot more attention to themselves than just a normal utility pole. I could send you some photo examples, but there's one out in the Fraser Valley that the locals refer to as the Q-tip or the toilet brush, because it does not look like a tree. So, in our view, a more practical approach is to have good sighting, a clean installation, and just to have it look like a utility pole rather than sort of pretend that it's a tree. I'll leave it at that. Welcome any further comments.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. We've got Director Acton with a question.
Thank you. Do you ever remove cell towers, or like what does it? Are we committing forever here, and like what does it take to remove a cell tower?
Yeah, through the chair to the director. I have seen towers removed. I think the best example, though I shouldn't speak on their behalf, but as you may have heard, in Western Canada, Bell shares TELUS's network, and in Eastern Canada, TELUS shares Bell's network. And so Bell actually went around and decommissioned a large number of its existing tower assets. This was sort of over the past 10, 15 years. So that does happen as technologies evolve. If it becomes redundant, there is a process in place to remove and remediate infrastructure, and that's actually in every right-of-way agreement that we have. If we come up to the end of the term, it's no longer needed, or the agreement gets terminated for some reason, the infrastructure does get removed. However, probably what you're alluding to is the fact you don't see too many of these structures getting removed, and that's because normally the entities want to keep them in service, and so far, outside of the examples I've mentioned, we try to keep that infrastructure in place.
You haven't heard if they've had any garage sales of their old equipment, eh? Because I could tell you we could use some cell towers in a few areas. Do you have anything further, Director Acton? Director Nicholson's already spoken. Director Wilson, question for the applicant, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Gregg. You mentioned just now about keeping the old cell towers in place. There has been a lot of talk about putting monitoring systems around the province for fire protection and things like that. Would there ever be a chance that those old towers could be released or reused for that kind of monitoring there, rather than just sit there not doing anything?
Yeah, through the chair to the director. That's a great question. Actually, Rogers, I have seen, they put out a bit of a, brochure or webpage, if you will, about a program they have. There's some technology in place for fire monitoring. So I know Rogers is involved in that. I'm not directly involved. I can't speak to it very intelligently, unfortunately. But no, absolutely, there's opportunities to use those existing structures or even to share them if they're still active. They would have to look into it on, a site-specific basis and understand the need. But I think that's a great idea, and we should review it.
Thank you.
Director Nicholson, question for Mr. Gregg.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Gregg, first, can you remind me how much taller this tower is going to be than the TELUS tower next door?
Yes, through the chair to the director. It's a comparable height. Actually, I think they're both roughly 40 meters.
Okay.
I might be a meter or two off on the TELUS one. I'm less familiar with it, but that's what my memory tells me. So it's effectively the same height.
So would you regularly go and approach other companies about co-location when you're thinking about doing a project?
Yep. So we tend to do that and see if there's interest in sharing the structures. So the challenge that we see, though, is that the timing is often different. So, each company has their own budgets and plans and priorities. So sometimes it can take a while to get a response. and interest. But a lot of the towers are shared, and the carriers do have, in each case, what they call actually an inter-carrier co-location department. So there are ongoing reviews and discussions across all the structures to see where sharing is feasible and where there's interest in that. So that is part of the process, and it's built into the federal requirements around tower sharing as well. So if for example, if Rogers were to request space on a TELUS tower or vice versa, they're effectively obligated to review it and offer a position.
Can I ask one follow?
Go ahead.
So when I look at your reasons for why this co-location isn't possible, strikes me that none of them would prohibit it. It really comes down to a question of cost. Would that be correct?
No, fair comment. So it's not that it's physically impossible, but if you look at the reasons for it, so, TELUS presumably years ago was only needed a 40-meter tall tower. I'll be honest, I worked on some other proposals for other clients in years past in the CBRD, and there's an example of a proposal that got approved behind the Rona and Cobble Hill. At the time, there was a lot of pressure. We were actually essentially forced to reduce the height from 60 meters to 40 meters in order to get board approval for it. So that's a great example within the CBRD where, a proponent wanted a taller tower and it might have been viable to share, but the powers that were in place at the day didn't want a taller tower for aesthetic reasons, so they were forced to reduce the height by 20 meters, and then sharing it isn't possible because the second or third carrier that would come along would be below the tree line and would have abysmal service. So I don't know the history on why TELUS's tower is only 40 meters tall and why it was only structurally designed for one company, but that's the case. So in order to co-locate there, it would be a very sort of impractical process at this point in time. We'd have to, in order to not put TELUS out of service, get approval to put a tower in an adjacent area first. The landlord would have to be willing to temporarily accommodate the second tower so that we're not pulling down the first one before the second one goes in. And then we'd have to convince TELUS to remove, a very valuable tower asset, rip it down, rebuild a bigger one, and go onto there and go through the whole consultation and process we just completed here all over again. So there's a lot of, I think, kind of waste in terms of process, cost, and essentially we'd be starting all over again. And it would be subject again to the landlord agreeing to that. So I don't think it's just cost. I think it's practicality. It's not always practical to be ripping down towers and rebuilding them. What's in it for TELUS? Why would they want to do that?
Seeing no other hands, thank you, Mr. Gregg. And we have before us a recommended resolution from staff. They have provided a comparison to our policy, and I turn to the director for the area on what's your pleasure? Hang on, go ahead.
I think it's in the community's interest to have good cell coverage, but I really don't believe it's in their interest to have the skyline littered with cell towers, because companies who reap the benefits from them aren't able to plan in a coordinated, strategic way. I just find this whole thing with cell towers really challenging, and I can only move option 2, I think.
All right, we have a mover of option 2. Let me just get to it on the screen here. Hang on, I'm getting there. Someone's just grabbed the paper copy. That it be recommended to the board the letter of non-concurrence be provided to Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada in response to the proposed telecommunications facility at 2979 Allenby Road, PID 001048171. It's been moved by the director for the area. Is there a seconder? There's a seconder. Any discussion? On the motion, Director Acton. Oh, hang on. Go ahead.
I do support this because it's, although it's like almost a good spot, it's still not perfect or right. I think we still have lots of highway corridor and everything where we can put cell towers that will do just as good a job and then not impact local communities in the future.
Director Martman.
Thank you. What did they say about perfection being the enemy of something? But I struggle with this because I do follow the conversation with the director of the area. But I think what we're doing is entering a process where we have no say. And that's bothers me. I think we turn it over to another organization federally that will make a decision. And it's going to be always these decisions of, is it the best place? Because if we're not consulted early, like before things start, like what's the map of the whole area? What's the master plan for an area of cell towers? We're always going to be left with these decisions to say, is it going to work here? Is it not going to work here? And ultimately, it becomes down to an issue of what do cell towers provide for the community? And yes, this is going to be something that's going to be imposing and cause visual disturbance. But on the other hand, you get connectivity, you get safety, and everything that falls out of that. So I struggle with this because I think we're letting go of a process. I think it would be nice to know if we could go with option one with conditions, and try to put some more conditions around this than just to turn it over and let another organization decide. Thank you.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting this one. I'm a great believer in technology, and I think Mr. Gregg could answer this one. But if we are moving
We're
ever
not
more,
in questions right now, just
Yeah, I
comments
know.
on the resolution.
if we're moving into an era of ever more 5G, there will be a need for more towers. The coverage areas of 5G are smaller than what they used to be on the different frequencies, so I can't support this this particular motion. I'm in favour of option one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also conflicted that I want to support the director. Our area has had a lot of discussions over cell towers, and I think out of that process, we have a new, much more definitive telecommunication tower structure policy. And I raised a question earlier that maybe we can go back to staff and see about co-location specifications. And I do appreciate Mr. Gregg coming back and saying you just can't plan in advance without causing it to be bigger, taller, etc. But they followed the new telecommunication structure policy, and it's, as I say, I'm conflicted because I've counted on my colleagues' support for not pursuing one in Area D, and I think there's a silver lining for Area D that a tower will be located in a different location, which will benefit my area. So, again, I'm conflicted, but I can't support this this motion.
Director Nicholson to close.
Thank you. I appreciate this is a hard one, but I would point out that it doesn't meet one of our main criteria, which we talk about the preferred where the preference for where these are sited, and residential areas are the farthest away, and this are the lowest priority for having a cell phone tower in our own policy. And this is not more than 500 meters away from a residential area. And in fact, that is a business area with quite a bit of residential area mixed in. And so I am just really not comfortable with having two cell towers right almost within a block of one another in this area. I don't think it is in the long-term interests of it. And I would like to revisit the policy.
Everyone is clear of the resolution that it be recommended, or do you have it handy there, Ms. Ferguson? Could you read out option 2?
That it be recommended to the board that a letter of non-concurrence be provided to Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada in response to a proposed telecommunications facility at 2979 Allenby Road, PID 001048171.
Everyone's clear on the question? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Can we have staff make a note that we clearly need to have a refresher on our telecommunications tower siting policy? And that be added to an agenda at an upcoming meeting. Next item, R2. What? Director Nicholson.
So, presumably you want the
No,
reserve?
the motion carries.
Carried.
Oh, did it?
Yep.
So it was? Okay.
5-4, yeah. Next item, R2. Ms. DeBena.
Thank you, Chair. This is a subdivision application in the Agricultural Land Reserve, or ALR, for a proposed 7-lot boundary adjustment. Is there no slides today? Okay, doesn't matter. The subject properties are all part of a larger dairy
Ms.
farm.
DeBena, hang on. I've got a point or something being made.
Just a point of order because I'd like to make a referral motion. Should I wait till after the presentation
Referral motion on what?
to the APCs
On what?
on this application?
Well, yeah, we should wait till we've heard the presentation from staff. Yep. Go ahead, Ms. DeBena.
Thank you. So the subject properties are all part of a larger dairy farm operation in the ALR. Yeah, okay. Next, you can put on the next slide, maybe that's maybe more clear. So one parcel, parcel N, is within electoral area E. The rest of the parcels are currently within electoral area B. The E is shown in yellow on the left there. That's the existing boundaries. The proposed boundary adjustment, which is to your right there with purple, shows again the yellow is electoral area E, would create two parcels in electoral areas B and E, so they're kind of split jurisdiction. Comments from staff are addressed in the staff report in relation to that. The OCP generally doesn't support subdivision in the ALR. However, given that this is a proposal to do a boundary adjustment, they're not creating any additional lots. They will be eliminating a landlocked parcel and providing road access to all of the parcels, and that the proposal meets zoning bylaw regulations for boundary adjustments. Staff are recommending the application be forwarded to the ALC.
Thank you, Ms. DeBena. There's your recommendation. I'll go to the director for the area. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this whole area has a lot going on, as we know, we always talk about it. And I think it would be really great to get both the area B and the area E Planning Commission's perspective on this application. Mostly be also including area E, even though it's not completely, it's only a small part in area E. That whole area is actually treated more like area E, as we've said, the other side, that other side of area B. So I think it would be really important just to hear from their perspective because of all the land use issues we have over there. And so we haven't, even though it's not in our policy to consider this a subdivision, it is actually like a possible change that could create a lot of different uses. So, I would like to refer this both to Area B and Area E Planning Commission for comment. If someone seconds that.
Been moved and seconded. So I'm just wanting to get a little clearer definition for comment on what? On the,
Well, because it makes a big difference if we actually, how we send this to the ALR. So if we actually decide to not send it, the application doesn't move forward. So I think that's a lot of responsibility without having any community input or public input on that. So by sending it to our APCs, who are both are very strong citizens, a group of citizens that are acutely aware of the land use issues we have in our communities, and they bring a lot of value when they look at certain applications. So this is a really important area for water use. So I would like that's, in my opinion, would be good foresight for us.
Ms. DeBennett, do you understand the intent of the referral and what will be asked of the APCs?
Through the chair, I understand the intent, but I can speak to, just want to make sure it's clear what this application is for.
Well, yeah,
So-
this is really important because there's a clear, we don't refer these to APCs normally. There's no change in land use, it's a boundary adjustment.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
I think it's important for the directors to make clear the question that we're asking the APCs is because I'm not clear on what the question is that's being asked of the APCs.
Well, there could be two questions, but clearly the only question that matters is if we forward it to the ALR, because we don't have to do. I know it's already 7 lots, and we don't have to do a boundary adjustment, but it's the should we allow it? So we send it to whichever question we want to actually go to the APC, fine, but then it comes here and the end result is that it goes to the ALR. So we can ask them, should we grant them, should we proceed and forward this to the ALR, knowing that the result would probably be that the boundary adjustment would be granted, or do we not?
Does that help you?
Like,
Ms.
whatever
DeBennett?
question, I don't know
Is the
why
question?
I need to completely define it.
I'm trying to help staff out here because when they make a referral to the APC, they're sending them a report with a request for them to consider X. So is the request to consider this being referred to the ALC? Is that the question that you want to
Well,
ask?
can't it just be exactly what we have? Like advise the electoral area services on what options they should take?
Go there.
I'm looking over to Ms. Chirelf because there's referral policies and I'm kind of at a loss here too. Your seat 28. Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Chair, referral to the ALC is in order if this body wishes to make a referral to the APC. I'm full of acronyms today. A referral to the APC is, or multiple APCs is certainly a resolution that this body can recommend to the board. It's totally in order.
Director Wilson.
Given the proposed boundary adjustment would create access to a current landlocked parcel and provides road access for all lots, would not result in additional parcels, complies with density and siting provisions in the A1 zone, and there appears to be no net loss or impact to agricultural capability of ALR land, staff are recommending option 1. Just that one paragraph to me is key. there's no change apart, as you've pointed out, just a boundary change. So I don't see the point of sending this to the ALC. And my apologies to the area director, but it's fairly straightforward to me.
Referral motion has been made and duly seconded. Any further discussion? I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion is defeated. Director Acton.
Well, so if you continue to read on in the report, there are other implications that would happen by allowing the boundaries to be changed. It could result in more subdivision. So I think these are things that the community should be taking into account especially when we have water issues and a working plan on the Coax Isla, and it's just to me a matter of respect.
Well, we've had a referral resolution that has failed. We have R2 before us still. There's no resolution on the floor. Are there any further questions for Ms. DeVena? Do we have the applicants present today? Is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion? Yes. So please come forward, tell us who you are, press the button. Oh, the button's been pressed, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Steve Frew. I'm here with my wife Janice. We are the applicants for this. Just a little bit of history of how this actually came to be. My father actually purchased the bottom 80 acres in 1962. He sold then what is now considered Lot 1 to Ocean Cement as a quarry. That was the shale quarry for Bamberton. The lots all used to have road access and go down to the river. We repurchased that property in, I believe it was 84, and we took it from industrial land to agricultural land at that time. Along with that came, what we repurchased was 34 acres, so an additional 14 acres, which was lot N and A at that time. So this proposal would put it back to where it was historically and eliminate the landlocked parcel.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Director Wilson.
Thank you very much. The question of subdivision has been brought up here. And one of the things that it says in the report is since the parcels are within the ALR, blah, 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 the ALC would have to consider such a proposal. Staff consider the risk of further subdivision under section to be minimal. The applicant could offer a voluntary no further subdivision covenant to address any concerns. Is that something that you would be happy with?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Director Nicholson.
I'll move the recommendation with the additional request to the ALC that there be a covenant.
That there be a
Regarding
no
the
further subdivision covenant?
No, yeah.
Okay, let's let Ms. Ferguson craft something. Knocked me out of my chair. So it'll be the recommended resolution with the additional recommendation that a no further subdivision covenant be included in the recommendation to the ALC. Thank you very much for coming and providing your comment. So I think we have a mover. What? Oh, Ms. Pressman, you have something to say. Your seat 27. Welcome. You have a comment? We don't have a seconder yet, so.
Thank you, Chair. I do just want to point out that these lots are already under the minimum lot size. They couldn't be subdivided further.
Right, but my understanding is there's a jurisdictional line that will go through there that opens it up that?
It still would be the minimum lot size. They wouldn't be able to subdivide along the electoral area boundary.
Okay, so why was that raised, I guess?
Ms. DeBenna, can you provide us with some clarity?
Thank you, Chair. So, the staff report notes the notwithstanding clause in regulation, the section 12.5, which is in the Area E zoning bylaw, that says notwithstanding the minimum parcel size provisions of each zone where a parcel is cut in two by a jurisdictional boundary line, which would be two different electoral areas, for example, the parcel line may be subdivided along the jurisdictional boundary line. It is important to note that these lots are in the ALR, so if they were to proceed with applying for a subdivision application like that, it would have to go, it would basically come back to, they would submit an application, the ALC would come back to the CVRD in a similar situation as this. And then if it was forwarded to the ALC, they would need to make a decision on whether further subdivision of agricultural land is something they want to do, which...
So from what I'm hearing, the amended option 1 resolution with the no further subdivision is completely in order. So I haven't taken a seconder on it yet. Now we have a seconder. So the resolution is before us. Do we have any further discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, would you read the resolution, Ms. Ferguson? Because it is an amended resolution.
That it be recommended to the board that application number ALR 25B01 2190 Forest Road, PID 004147189 and 004142021 and 004 147308, 007920326, 431, 007920491, and 003734501 be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission with an additional recommendation that a no further subdivision covenant be recommended.
Everyone's clear on the resolution. Director Martman has a comment.
Thank you. You know, I think this is spending money where it isn't necessary for the applicant and for the CVRD. You know, this agricultural land is under the ALC, as we all know. Subdivision of those lands are under the ALC, as we all know. And if someone could convince the ALC that this should be subdivided, which is like zero chance in snowballs somewhere. Anyways, so all we're doing is putting paperwork on something that honestly cannot go forward in today's world. Perhaps there will be a world one day where ALC will say, hey, we want 1 acre lots everywhere, but I don't see that ever happening in our lifetimes. So I'm not in favor.
So just to be completely fair to everyone, and is there a consideration of considering the resolution with the recommendation being an amendment, or do we just want to proceed with what we have on the books and vote how we vote? Director Wilson.
Yeah, if I heard right from behind here, then Ms. Pressman has already said this is the minimum parcel size. It can't be subdivided. So what is the point of bringing forward an amendment which says, let's subdivide something, or can we subdivide something, or don't subdivide something, which can't be done under the bylaws? I'm confused here. We're putting forward, as Ben says, we're putting forward something that really is not even enforceable.
So let's be very clear. We don't have a separated resolution. We've got a resolution with a recommendation that a no subdivision covenant, and that's what we're forwarding to the ALC. So I think we heard a little bit of conflicting information, and that I think what Director Nicholson understood is the electoral area trumps parcel size, and that you can have a subdivision through. Now, Ms. Pressman said something to the contrary, which, Ms. Pressman, do you want to provide clarity?
sorry for the confusion, Chair. So as Jamie followed up, for proposed lots F and G that are in 2 jurisdictions under the current zoning bylaws, under the zoning bylaw for Area E, and the zoning bylaw for Area B, there is a clause that could allow subdivision along jurisdictional boundaries. But like I think it was Director Martman pointed out, or staff, that would still need to go through the ALC process as well as the subdivision process. And with the site conditions, those would be very small lots and probably most likely not possible. And as was mentioned, it's just for 2 of the proposed lots.
Please proceed. Press your button. Go ahead.
And this is one of the reasons why we need a modernised OCP and HOCP, because you've got competing jurisdictions here at D and E. So the sooner that's done, the better. Thank you very much. And thank you for the clarification as well.
Director Nicholson, to close.
I would like the motion to stand because we can't look into the future and understand whether the ALC will be around in 20 years. We can't look into the future and understand what the potential for agriculture is, but we know that we always use a lot of water, and I would really like to put whatever constraints that might possibly happen to reduce subdivision, because I think that we do have a water problem in the Cook's Island, and it's important that we don't open ourselves up to more development where we don't need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. The resolution has been read, is in order, has been duly moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? One opposed, the motion carries. That will go through to the board meeting on Wednesday, May the 14th. Thank you for coming in today. Next item. Yeah, okay, everybody back at 3:45, please. Welcome back, everyone. I believe we are now on item R3. Mr. Tippett, welcome. What do you got for us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello to the committee as well. Michelle, are you going to bring up R3 for me? Thank you. What I have for you is a very brief slideshow in relation to a covenant, which is interesting because it was a kind of topic that we were talking about last item as well. So there has been a request from what we call Walrus, which is the Ministry of Water, Lands, what is the RS? Resource Stewardship, I think, Ministry, to have the board issue an approval pursuant to Clause 8 of a covenant that was registered by the CVRD against what's called the Southlands, which you can see on the map there. It's south of the Bamberton quarry site. And just for orientation, the Malahat Skywalk is actually, let's see, which side will it go to? I'll go to this side. It's about here. So the covenant actually applies to the entire site, and in fact it applies to a number of other parcels apart from the one that's shown on that subject property map. The complication in terms of the particulars of this Malahat Skywalk is it was first approved by way of rezoning, and at that time the people who were the proponents for it were given a license of occupation, which is the, I guess, weakest form of tenure over Crown land. That license of occupation is coming up for expiry, and the Crown and the operators of the facility, which includes Malahat First Nation, are looking to turn it into a lease. The complication arises because leases of any term over 3 years, which this would be, have to be registered at the Land Title Office in Victoria, and they consider the registration of such a lease to be a subdivision. And the covenant that we hold over that property says no subdivision. However, there's a clause 8 in the bylaw, or sorry, not the bylaw, in the covenant that allows the board by resolution to authorize a deviation from this interdiction. And if you can switch to the next slide, please. My recommendation essentially is that the board, or we recommend, this committee recommend to the board next week that the clause 8 be invoked to expedite the registration of the long-term lease in favor of the Malahat Nation through Walrus, I'll call it again. I always forget their name. And that would allow this lease to go forward and would protect the site in the interim between now and when a treaty settlement eventually happens, at which point the Malahat Nation will probably end up owning the land again.
We have a mover of the recommendation, and there's a seconder. Any resolution was on the screen. Director Martman.
Does this fit into any of the 95 calls to action?
Mr. Tippett.
I do not know the answer to that question.
I guess the reason I bring it up, if it does, I think we should just make note of that.
Yeah,
If it
sorry, I
passes.
can't answer that question. I'm not familiar enough with the document reference to be able to answer that.
I think we're doing our part.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. 2R4, project charter, Ms. Wright, Mr. Tippett. Who's taking this one? Ms. Wright? Welcome.
Thank you. I don't think I've been up here yet with this new system. Can you start the presentation? Thank you, Michelle. So I'm here to present an amended project charter for the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So it's being amended to reflect the adjusted timeline for the MOCP project to ensure that the public engagement for the comprehensive zoning bylaw will not overlap with the MOCP statutory bylaw process and public hearing. The project charter has also been adjusted to accommodate the consultants engaged on the project, which include Liquor Geospatial and Lanark Consulting. That's the slide I want. So in terms of the adjusted timeline, the APC meetings have been adjusted to now occur in Q2 or early Q3 of 2025, and then again in Q1 of 2026. First Nations engagement now indicates that it will begin in Q2 and remain ongoing. Public open houses have been shifted from Q4 2025 to Q1 to Q2 2026 to reflect the board's direction to conduct additional APC and public engagement on the OCP. Also, holding the engagement sessions after the holiday season is expected to have greater turnout than during the December holiday. The bylaw introduction will be shifted to Q2 2026, and referrals are now explicitly included on the milestone list and have already actually begun in Q2 2024. So to note, we have actually already sent the draft agricultural zones to the Ministry of Agriculture and the ALC for what we're calling informal referrals. We wanted to see what they said about the zones before we bring them forward again to the public, and we've received comment back from them, but they did not, and we will provide comments eventually to the EASC, but to note, they haven't recommended any major changes from what we presented them. So next slide, please. So when we presented in February, we introduced a two-phase approach to engaging the APCs, which included a hybrid information session for all APC members that will be recorded, and where we will provide an overview of the applicable zones and associated regulations. And following these sessions, the individual APCs will convene separately to discuss the material and pass informal resolutions with their recommendations to the board. So with this, there are no proposed changes. The one change is that in the order of the sequencing of the zones. So the consultants pointed out that residential and commercial zones should actually be put together, and because they don't have availability this spring and summer to help, that they recommended that it be switched to our second phase. So those are basically the reasons for the changes. So phase one now formerly included residential zones, and now it's being changed to remove residential zones and replace it with parks, institutional, and water zones. And then phase two will now comprise of commercial, industrial, and residential zones. And then just the last point I wanted to kind of touch on is that last week at the special EASC meeting, there was discussion regarding short-term rentals and agritourism accommodation. So there are reports on both of these topics being prepared for the next EASC meeting of May 21st. And I'm finished my quick and dirty presentation there.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Director Wilson.
Thank you very much. I think the only comment I've got, and this goes forward to 2026, and the final adoption being Q2, Q3. What my fear is that it goes to Q4, because by that time we'll be into possibly a whole new board here. So any further delays, if possible, let's get it done while all of us here have been involved in the HOCP and MOCP stuff. Not really a question, more of a comment. Thank you.
Director Segal.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Wright, I'm wondering if the outcomes of our customer satisfaction survey from last week will be considered in the project.
I apologize. To answer that, I'm going to need just a little more information to go on. Which part of it?
The highlight was that the region really wants to focus on the unhoused community and finding solutions. And so I see our CZB project as a real opportunity to find creative housing solutions, particularly in electoral areas, so that we can stop funneling people towards living in an unhoused situation. So just wanted to wondering if that's considered.
I feel like Ms. Cheryl.
Sure.
Through the chair to Director Segal. So the problem that you're referring to is complex and involves multiple jurisdictions. Certainly there's an opportunity for zoning to provide for a variety of housing types. But there are certain things that we have no ability to address through land use planning. It really requires participation through senior levels of government, the nonprofit sector, and others. And so there was a report that previously came to committee on potential housing, potential solutions around housing. That was deferred, but should come back to this this body, or rather the committee of the whole, sometime during Q2, which is soon, imminently. So I think there'll be an opportunity for more robust discussion on that particular topic at that time. Certainly through the CZB, we'll attempt to do what we can.
Okay, thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you. Thank you for putting timelines that meet our needs, as Director Wilson was saying. And I was just looking at the notes from the workshop we had on short-term rentals. And I had two notes. I'm just curious if where these fit in, or you can make comment. One of them we were talking about was the bed and breakfasts, and the other one we were talking about was agritourism. And wondering how those things fit into this timeline, and is there any ways to, like, at what point can we tell the communities that, or you will tell the communities, this is the target and this is when you're going to be able to have something solid? So maybe you could address that.
Through the chair to the director, that's kind of what I was alluding to in my last statement there, is that at the next EASC meeting, there'll be reports on both that will come from Mr. Tippett and Mr. Buchan, who have both worked on those projects, or on those, mini projects there. So May 21st.
Yeah, someone I worked with says on those dossiers.
Sure, I'll use that term.
But I guess this leads me to, I'm trying to understand process. So if this comes back as a report, and what kind of decisions are we looking at do decisions that get made coming out of those reports, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's no decisions being made, maybe it's more information, but at what point, because I see this being adopted at the end of 2026, how do agritourism and bed and breakfast information get moved ahead, like, or taken care of prior to
Right.
the full adoption?
I think Ms. Cheroff is.
Through the chair.
Ms. Cheroff.
Director Martman. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw project is, has a timeline, and staff are trying to follow that in order to meet this body's expectations around completion. We recognize also that there's some specific time-sensitive concerns around bed and breakfast operations, agritourism activities, and we want to address those in the reports that come forward on the 21st. There are bylaws that have been directed in relation to temporary use permits, and there are bylaws also that are contemplated in relation to potential amendments to the bed and breakfast regulations that you have. That could be, pending this bodies supporting that direction. Those amendments could result in some relaxation of some of the regulations that you have. So you may see that as an interim amendment to the bylaws that you have now.
Okay, my turn. So I'm drawn into being a bit of a buffer here in that this and the MOCP and HOCP and the LAPs are, the bread and butter of what land use services does, community planning does, and we're creating a document that is truly foundational and different in that most communities, each electoral area has their own piece, and I'm supportive of this. Where I'm having to act as the buffer is my community, and specifically my EPC has been finding it very challenging to have their input and their advice and direction incorporated in the other documents that we're not talking about today. We're here talking about the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And their direction to me is that if the work that's been done thus far isn't meeting their needs and expectations, and we're moving forward with the comprehensive zoning bylaw charter and sort of locking in as best we can, it is not going to give APCs and communities the ability to look at the entire package concurrently. And I know that generally it's you do your OCPs and then you follow up with your zoning. So my community and my APC are struggling in that they want to participate, but they want to participate having a full picture of the other components that I've talked about, and to see if that direction and guidance in the MOCP and the LAPs and the TUPs and all the other acronyms we're using are going to be reflected in the zoning, because the zoning is the regulatory stuff. It's what gives all of the other information teeth. So I'm asking, how can we ensure that that concern is reflected and addressed? Because, but if we get the zoning and there isn't agreement on the work that's been done in advance, how can it be, we hope to get a zoning bylaw that's going to reflect our needs?
I think Ms. Cheroff would like to take that one as well.
Please do. Ms. Terrell.
Thank you, Chair. So Referrals to the advisory planning commissions on the official community plan and local area plans have been made. And so we are expecting comments back, and have actually received some comments back from APCs on those referrals. And they will come back with a report to this committee for consideration. So it'll be this body as a whole, which will consider collectively all of the comments that come back from the APCs, and can weigh those in relation to the draft bylaws that are advancing, and can at that time make whatever changes you wish to make to the bylaws to address your concerns. But this is the decision-making body. It's not the APCs. This is the body. And because it is a collective official community plan, obviously with individual local area plans, there is a need to work together on what the collective policies will be for the region's electoral areas.
And sorry, if I may just add to it, what we're going to be presenting to APCs and to the board eventually will be a package that shows, hopefully the MOCP gets adopted, so the MOCP policies in how the comprehensive zoning bylaw is responding to the policies. So we are going to try to be as clear as possible on how the CZB is responding to what is being implemented on the ground or implemented through policy in the OCP.
So I guess the question that I raise is we're being asked to recommend the charter and timelines on the CZB now, and we haven't yet had that report that's coming forward on the work that's been done to this point. And if there's incongruence of those two things, if there's additional work or reconsideration of various items within that could ultimately, because it feeds into the comprehensive zoning bylaw, what amendment to the charter is possible if we've already, approved and are moving forward on that. So I just see, as I say, an incongruence of the two if we haven't completed the one and we're, for lack of a better term, locking in the charter on the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Ms. Terrell.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the OCP has been referred and, comments are coming back, and there'll be a public hearing process. There's an opportunity to make adjustments. We're hopeful that because there's been a multi-year process to develop the OCP, there won't be wholesale changes to the document as it stands. The zoning bylaw that gets adopted needs to be consistent with the OCP. So ultimately, the CZB will come following the OCP, and whatever language is in there has to align with the OCP. So if we do see changes in the OCP that'll affect the zoning that's being developed now, that will be adjusted by staff. But we don't internally see any challenges with the CZB project charter as it's been drafted and allowing those zones to develop in draft form as Lauren has presented.
I'd love to know who seat 20 is. Mr. Tippett, seat 20.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just to supplement what Ann was saying and what Lauren was saying, I think specific to your question about 2 weeks from today, when we're hoping to bring reports coming back to this committee on short-term rental matters, on other housing-related amendments to the zoning bylaws and the temporary use proposals. If there is something that comes out of that discussion that you think might need to somehow be integrated into the CZB project, that's going to happen as a matter of course, because we're all working together on it. So the likelihood that we'd have to make an adjustment, as Anna was saying, to the project charter is very low. However, if for some reason, probably not the one I just explained, it was necessary, we'd probably come back and do that. But I don't think that will be the reason. Thanks.
Director Martman.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I hear your angst perhaps, or your concern around the APCs. And, I think we all are fairly close with our APCs. And my sense of this is that, staff are presenting timelines and these are what we are trying to, or they're trying to work within. Ultimately, it's us at the table that's going to, whether it's going to be able to be followed. And I think that that's our job to really do that. And I guess I reach out to my APC and go like, where are you on this, and what steps do I need to take as a director to try to get it aligned? And if it's not happening, then I really hear for you and feel. But at the same time, if we can't stick to the MOCP timelines, that means the said B timelines aren't going to be there, and that's going to be another board. So I guess I'm trying to encourage how do we create space and time? So that, not time, we don't have time. How do you create the space so that you can have that place for people to speak up and get heard and, as best we can, get it incorporated? So I guess the clock is ticking and we don't have a luxury to leave it a week or 2 weeks or a month down the road. So each of us, I think, has to take that on and say, this is our job right now if we're going to keep these timelines. So it's on us. Thank you.
And I thank you for those remarks, because they would almost think that you and I had a discussion in the hallway before we came in. But that's precisely what I'm doing as the director for my area, is letting everybody know that my APC is feeling a real disconnect in the long-range HOCP, MOCP, LAP, all of the work that's being done in advance of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and are wanting to have linkages as opposed to space. And it's, I'll leave it at that you know that there's some uncomfortable moments ahead, I'm sure, because they're feeling very strong about some of the shortcomings that we're working on right now. And I will, we have a charter to recommend to the board, and, staff have to work to something. I'm just making sure everybody knows that we want to make sure that we get the best product coming out of this, and we've got a little bit more work to do. So I'll leave it at that. We have a resolution before us that reads that it be recommended to the board that the amended comprehensive zoning bylaw charter April 2025 be endorsed. Does somebody want to move that? It's been moved, seconded. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed, the motion carries. That goes through to the board on the 14th, next week. Next item, R5. Ms. Surdy, welcome.
Well, hello, good afternoon. So today we're presenting the new curbside collection bylaw 4641. This will enable the new 3-stream curbside collection service that will start on January 2nd, 2025, and will include organics, recycling, and glass collection. So this program is being implemented as per the board and provincially approved solid waste management plan, with a goal to reduce landfilling of reusable materials and to ensure that our curbside collected organics and recyclables are free from contamination by providing all residents with access to garbage collection. When adopted, this bylaw will replace curbside bylaw 1958, which is currently in effect. And I note that this bylaw was first adopted in 1996, which is almost 20 years ago now. And at this time, we had a landfill locally to dispose of our waste, but not for much longer. It was deemed full in the late 90s. And I also note, as projected by AVICC Special Solid Waste Working Group, in another 20 years, we will have run out of landfill space in BC. And that's why we're all working to divert as much material from landfilling as possible. And as you know, about 30% of what we ship to landfill in Washington state right now is divertible, compostable materials that could be managed on Vancouver Island instead. So back to the 3-stream curbside bylaw. As you have seen, attachment A and B includes the new and the old bylaw, but I will highlight some key changes between the two. So we have updated the definition to ensure that they are consistent with our zoning bylaws and policies. We've also added several definitions to reflect the inclusion of organics and glass. And we have also removed some definitions that are outdated and don't reflect the current service. One being that we do provide service to manufactured home parks. And some new things. We have also added the sections for the board's role to develop specific policies. For example, any service exemption policies, as a placeholder for new regulations in the bylaw, which will help facilitate any future amendments. So last but not least, the resolution the recommended resolution in the staff report is that it's recommended to the board on May 14, 2025, that CVID bylaw number 4641, residential curbside collection bylaw 2025 be given first, second, and third reading, and that CVID bylaw 4641, residential curbside collection bylaw 2025 be adopted in preparation for the rollout on June 2nd. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Sarity. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Elsa. The one question, or rather the one sentence that you've mentioned, such as a ban on disposing of organics in garbage, which currently represents more than 1/3 of the garbage exported to Washington State. That if we stop, obviously, the export of that, it's going to save us a fair amount of money, but it's also going to leave us with a fair amount of organics to be disposed of.
Ms. Sarity.
You know where I'm going to with this one. Where is it going to go?
Through to you, through the chair to Director Wilson. Yes, as we know, there will be more organics to manage, and we are going out to competitive bid in, I think it's about end of 2026, and we know that there's at least 2 companies that are very competitive and would like to bid on this material.
In the meantime, though, it would all be...
It continues to go to the contracted facility in Cobble Hill.
Okay, thank you.
Director Martin.
I know the wording in the bylaw has probably been gone over and over and over again, but I'm finding it confusing when you get into the terms dwelling units, because it talks about where you can have 2 dwelling units and they can share, and then it says there's another place in there where it says you have 2 dwelling units and you can't share. And some of them break it down because it's an accessory dwelling unit, and some of them are principal dwelling units. It's just, yeah, I don't know if it opens up for being contradictory or issues, but have you noticed that as well or not?
I go to Ms. Sarity and think that might be the opening where policy can be developed, but I'll go to you, Ms. Sarity.
Through to you, Chair, to Director Markman. Yes, it's a bit of a complex read, I admit, and the dwellings are mentioned in many different kinds. I haven't seen any conflict that I've noticed, and we have had a legal review of the bylaw, so I trust that everything is in order. If we can certainly develop some clarifying, more residential-friendly material to sort of translate this bylaw in a way that we can all more easily talk about what the rules are.
Okay, and so I think that would be great. I think, some guidance or guidelines would be useful. I'm sure you're working on that. But I think the piece, I just want clarity around then, where it says 2 dwelling units cannot share one service. Can you explain that in more detail?
Through to you, Chair, to Director Markman, can you point out which section you're referring to? Sorry.
Yeah, maybe carry on.
Okay, sure, we'll revisit.
While we're looking for clarity on that, I happen to be one of those individuals that has to pay 2 utility fees because I've got 2 dwelling units on a parcel. As a duplex, so I think we can get further clarification on that. But I'm looking. I see no other questions. I'd like to get the resolution on the floor for consideration. So we have a mover and a seconder. Okay, and while we seek clarification on that, Mr. Director Martman's fingers are going really fast. Director Martman, would that be a clarification that you could get between now and the board? Okay. So looking, we have a resolution and it reads, or did we actually had this read out already by Ms. Sarity. Is everyone clear on the resolution that's before us? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. That goes through to the 14th in time for a rollout, hopefully. Next item is R6, bonds. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Director. So this report is fairly self-explanatory. It was contingent on the adoption of the new waste collection bylaw. And essentially, this aligns all the fines and associated monetary penalties in line with the new provisions of the newly proposed bylaw.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? Do we have a mover of the recommendation? Moved. Do we have seconder? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Harris. You're up for R7. Unsightly premises and abandoned property bylaw 2025. Sounds exciting.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to essentially introduce a new unsightly premises and abandoned properties bylaw within the CBRD. Within the CBRD strategic plan, there was an initiative to review and update and modernize nuisance bylaws. Unsightly premises are considered to be a nuisance under the Local Government Act. Currently, the CBRD works with an unsightly premise bylaw that dates back to 1991, so it's even older than that garbage bylaw. And it was evident that it needed some review. So what this bylaw essentially does is regulates rubbish, garbage, derelict vehicles on properties, graffiti, and one of the new introductions and a modernization to the bylaw is actually adding in the requirement to secure an abandoned property. It's something that CBRD bylaws has been receiving more calls in respect to abandoned properties and the lack of security and essentially unlawful occupation and all the other problems that come with it. So this unsightly premises and abandoned properties bylaw will marry the two together. We'll have the unsightly provisions, including graffiti. We're just going to remove the house numbering from this bylaw as it's captured in our new building bylaw, so we can drop that from the title, and have additional provisions regarding abandoned properties that really is essential for the owners of these properties to secure these properties to prevent unlawful occupation and all the problems that come with it. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Harris? Director Martman.
You know, sometimes the one-size-fits-all approach, I just, in a rural area where the properties are 10 acres, and you say you identify it as being abandoned, and then you say, well, you need owner has to put a perimeter fencing up. It just seems to be impossible task.
Through the chair to Director Martman. Essentially, so what this does is specific to the structure itself. It's not fencing in an entire property, and it truly is for an abandoned property, not an owner that maybe snowbirds away for the winter or something, where there is no intention by any owner or tenant or lawful occupier to return to the property whatsoever. And it is evident, typically based on neighborhood information, that it's being accessed. And like I say, all the problems that go with that. So it is extremely hard to paint one brush across the 9 electoral areas, and your point is well taken. But this is, like I say, specific to the structure itself, and clearly an owner that has no intention to return whatsoever. And we do see that now with the price of real estate, where some of these properties, it seems to be a little more prevalent in the south end, are sitting with these unoccupied houses just for the value of the land. And they're in no rush to, they're not going to probably tenant the house. It's really comes pretty much at a tear down state, but the value of the land is that it's worth holding on to while they try and figure out their future plans for it. So
as a follow-up to that one, so if that's the intent, and I get it, I believe you're really saying about safety and concerns around that. The 30-day, how do they get the 30-day target to be? It seems like that's not even a short-term rental anymore, or it is a short-term rental. That was a joke, but how do you come about the 30-day number versus 180 days or 365 days?
Mr. Harris.
Through the chair to Director Martman, great question. What we did is we looked at other local governments. This is, I didn't really see these type of provisions within a regional district, but there are municipalities and towns, and 30 days seem to kind of be the norm out there. It could be increased to 60 or 180 essentially, but why wait really? It's time to jump on the problem, and if it's very evident that nobody is coming back to occupy that structure, 30 days should be sufficient, but that's my opinion.
I have one other question unless others.
Go ahead.
So thank you for that. The other part of the bylaw that caught my attention was the nuisance part of it. Can you elaborate on, has that been has not been on the books, or has that nuisance been on the books, where I think it states the that use that unreasonably interferes with another owner's enjoyment of real property? Is that new to this, or that something that's been added? Yeah.
Sure. Again, through the chair to Director Martman, that is what has always been in place. So essentially, an unsightly property is a nuisance property. It's categorized under the Local Government Act as one of many nuisances that is recognized as a nuisance through local government. So the current unsightly premise bylaw is actually to deal with nuisance properties in an unsightly manner. This bylaw continues to deal with nuisance properties in respect to aesthetics or unsightliness, but it also captures an abandoned property and labels it potentially as a nuisance if it is disturbing or impeding on the enjoyment of adjacent properties where these things are being accessed, the house is being accessed, unlawful occupation, RCMP. So it is a nuisance as well, and that's how we've captured that. So like I say, to repeat myself, unsightly properties are considered a nuisance through the Local Government Act. That's nothing new. The abandoned properties aspect is also considered a nuisance, and that's something we thought we'd introduce and modernize and attempt to address some of these situations we're coming across.
Thank you. Thanks for the work on this. Cheers.
Director Deck.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about like a specific example in my area is a house that's falling over, but it has rodents in it that now are entering other people's property on both sides, and you weren't allowed, as my understanding, you weren't allowed to go into the house before, Is there any difference there now? Does it remain a problem? I think that's what I'd like to know.
Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to Director Deck. I believe I'm familiar with the house you're talking about. Is the property occupied?
No.
Okay. In that situation, you know, really the nuisance property is, it creates a nuisance if the property owner hasn't taken measures against unauthorized entry or occupation or vandalism. So essentially, if it's evident that the owner or tenant or an occupier is not returning and they never will return, this bylaw could address the overgrown vegetation that's associated with that. And if there was evidence of unlawful entry, then it could compel an owner to address that. But if it's just merely the fact that rodents are getting in through holes wherever, that would probably not trigger a requirement for the owner to secure the property. It's really about unlawful entry. And however, it also manages overgrown vegetation that may aid unlawful entry as well too. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Isn't local governments aren't rats called vectors? Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I got a couple of questions. Is it possible that you can ever have a derelict home torn down or removed?
Yeah, I believe if there, I did talk to Director Nicholson. I did talk to our chief building inspector regarding generally unsafe structures falling down. He had conveyed that within the Local Government Act, it's a little looser than the community charter, but if there was a structure that was in imminent danger of being a hazard to a neighboring property or some form of infrastructure that needed to come down immediately, there's an avenue through the Local Government Act under the direction of the Chief Building Inspector to start a process for removal.
And does this bylaw apply to like an RV or a mobile home?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, does this apply to an RV or a mobile home?
Yeah. There's lots of abandoned.
No, it doesn't. It's specific to structures, so it doesn't go on about recreational vehicles or anything to that effect.
But the same issues could apply to those, right? People living unlawfully in them and so forth.
To Director Nicholson, it technically, you have a really good point. People could unlawfully enter one of those, but within the intent of this bylaw and the wording I'm seeing in this bylaw, it's not applicable to recreational vehicles.
Can I have one more?
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering if it's, like, I think when these issues come up, it affects the communities, and fire hazard is one of the things that I think is most important, as well as things like noxious or invasive plants that get out of control. And I think the rat issue is not something that we should not try and address, because it can, we have, that problem is growing with climate change and so forth. So, yeah, that can be a real issue.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, points well made. This does speak to fire hazards in respect to, the unoccupied dwelling, which we've had conversations with our manager of fire services back in October regarding the proposal of this bylaw, which actually provides them the authority to enforce the bylaw. And it's not all about them enforcing the bylaw. And I made that very clear. It's about bringing them in as the subject matter experts to deemed through their observations or what's going on if there is an actual fire hazard, which bylaw enforcement is not trained to recognize. And in respect to the noxious plants, there is a noxious weeds bylaw at this time. It's a separate standalone bylaw. It deals with specifically giant hogweed, and no, they've added like cow parsnip or something to it. I can't remember what they call it exactly, but there are 2 plants on it now through environmental services, but that can always be expanded. And the rodents is a good point with climate change, et cetera, and maybe worth exploring if we can, you know, capture that in there moving forward down the road if we do a little research and check into it.
Before I go to Director Acton, Director Deck, did you want back on the list, or will you lower your hand? Director Acton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy that the unsightly premises bylaw is being revised. It has had little effect in my community, and I know there's quite a few properties leading at almost like a gateway to the community. And, but there's mention here of like unsightly materials, but I'm wondering, like, is that defined? Because we've had boats hanging off of cliffs and like, that's not exactly unsightly material, but maybe where it is problematic. And, yeah, and then also to this bylaw, I wonder if, what I heard from the community was they would call it in and they would be told, but that's not your neighbor. So we're not really gonna do anything about it. So clearly, like, a lot of these places are not really, you know, directing the neighbor, but it's impacting our community on how we are perceived and how visitors see us.
Mr. Harris?
Thanks, Chair, to Director Acton. To your first question, yes, unsightly is defined within the bylaw, and the same as rubbish, and we've expanded on those definitions to have a little more discretion for an officer to capture potentially items that are contributing to the unsightliness. When it comes to your second point, that what you've heard from your constituents, that the unsightly properties aren't prioritized if they're not directly affected, there's probably some truth to that. It doesn't mean it's not ignored, and that's, you know, you're coming with that information. Typically, it is based on priorities. It's what is the impact to the person complaining? What is the impact to the community? You've made a good point that unsightly properties do impact the community. But we're really looking at, you know, an impact to a direct neighbor. We're resource-based. Unsightly property investigations can be very lengthy, as we all know, very involved. A lot of emotions are high, typically with the property owners or the tenants. So it's all about priorities, and you know, it's going to be less of a priority if it's not a neighbor directly impacted by an adjacent property, unless it's truly a health, safety, or an environmental degradation that we elevate that. So I do regret if somebody has told you that it won't be addressed, but it is a consideration to what the priority is. And, you know, we have to look at the big picture as for that.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, because even community members have come forward to me saying, like, should we make a petition? Or, so I guess if there's some items in our community that don't have that priority list, we'll figure that out when they come up. But so you mentioned, so that unsightly materials thing and the vagueness so that the officer can work with it. That's the part that I'm kind of like, do we leave it vague? Because essentially these properties need to go to court because we're not very successful with them. We get them to clean up a little bit and then it grows some more. And like, you know, a lot of them it's so overwhelming, the issue that's happening, that landowner can't clean it all up to your satisfaction or the community's satisfaction. So, and back to the boat example, like maybe boats should be listed, or because then, you know, it goes to court and the judge says, well, a boat is not unsightly, even though it was hanging on a cliff and it's not going to hit anyone. It's just a cliff, you know. So, so that's, I'm kind of wondering, like, does that list, like, do we need a list that has just about everything on it so that people can't say, okay, fine, take me to court and you're not going to win because your unsightly items aren't even listed.
Through the director or the chair to Director Acton. Yeah, so if you take a look at the actual definitions within unsightly and within rubbish, it actually, this one goes a little further than the last one. So this one specifically talks about vessels and derelict vessels and also trailers. It goes into garbage, bottles, broken glass, scrap metals, waste, discarded materials, unwholesome materials, derelict vehicles, trailers, boats, vessels, machinery. Anything that is discarded or disused. So there's a little bit more of where we've expanded it. So somebody can't just say, well, that's got some value in it. Well, it's discarded and disused. You're never going to touch it. So maybe it's time to address it. So we feel that these definitions will help us enforce the bylaw a little better. And you know, it's doing unsightly investigations are extremely challenging. What one person's junk is another person's treasure. And we deal with different levels of hoarding. And things get challenging, and you're really working with somebody that maybe is tough to reason with, and these are their treasures. And we're ordering them to remove them, and we have to justify while we're doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's not, you know, a pleasant situation to be in for either the property owner or by law enforcement. We've got to find a happy medium in there and try and get some results.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's challenging, and I hope this makes it easier.
And as much as I'd like to move on to the next item, I think the question that I need to ask is, and Director Acton's had the issues, and you know, I'm not going to mention any specifics around enforcement, but community members have had to live with unsightly premises in their community, and the question I have is this bylaw and the enhancements going to change anything substantially so that the unsightly premises in the entry to Area B, or the unsightly premises that's got half a dozen neighbors, you know, shaking their heads every time they come home and look at a property, are we going to be able to, under this bylaw, be proactive? I'm not talking proactive enforcement, but are we going to be able to get the 4 worst offenders in the regional district? Are we going to be able to seek some resolution in 2025 on those files? Because most of them have been going on for years. They are very challenging, I get it, but is this bylaw going to give us more teeth?
I think it's modernized and the definitions are expanded. So I think it's giving us the teeth that were already there, and the teeth are a little sharper. I think really what the focus needs to be is how these unsightly premises are ultimately enforced. And within that report, I do advise of there's sort of clear language regarding compliance orders and what the consequences of failing to fulfill those compliance orders are essentially potentially board-directed cleanup. And I think that is what bylaw enforcement needs to look at, is our enforcement measures and the routes we're taking. And a ticket or a bond doesn't always resolve the situation. But a board direction or resolution to clean and failure for the owner to do so is default, and the regional district will come in and do it. That I've yet to see, but it'd be interesting to see one, and I think that these are one of the options we really need to start looking at for these substantial historical unsightly properties.
I'd love for staff to come forward with a report on the top 10 offenders in the regional district for us to consider in closed session at some point, but I'll leave it to my colleagues if they want to produce a resolution to that effect. Director Acton, to close. Time to move on.
Okay, to close. Yeah, so I was kind of heading in that direction, but more on the, thank you for acknowledging that, yeah, sometimes when people call in, it doesn't become a priority, or it's just, there, it's, not directly affecting them, so it doesn't get the kind of attention that, so I guess my question would be, can we have a conversation maybe along with that topic, but also maybe even just on unsightly premises, like maybe that certain bylaw, you don't have to live next door, because it does affect you. Like every day you drive by it, you're driving into your community, and it actually like lowers your spirit a little bit, kind of like depressing. This is the place I cherish, and I have to go through this. So yeah, maybe those are like two things that we could talk about.
Mr. Harris.
Through the chair to Director Acton, absolutely, and it's called an enforcement policy, and it's potentially an operational policy aside from that enforcement policy, and it is the direction of the board. The bylaw enforcement policy is the way that bylaw enforcement hangs their hat on enforcement, and that's the route we take, and that policy is the board's policy. That is how the board wants bylaw enforcement to enforce. It's just like the regulatory bylaws. They're not bylaw enforcement's bylaws. These are the board's bylaws. And so that opportunity is coming because we're preparing a draft policy, enforcement policy. And if the board would like to see proactive enforcement of unsightly properties, then the board can capture that within an operational policy, keeping in mind the limited resources that we do have.
Thank you for that, Mr. Harris. I think that this committee, or at least this member of this committee, would love to see something before we break for the summer. This is something that I think all of us would like to have a handle on sooner than later. With that, seeing no other hands, we have a recommended resolution, R7. Ms. Ferguson, would you read it, please?
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD bylaw number 4628, unsightly premises and abandoned property bylaw 2025, be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption. And 2, that subject to the adoption of the CVRD bylaw number 4628, unsightly premises and abandoned property bylaw 2025, I think there's a, 2025, CVRD bylaw number 4647, bylaw offense notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2025, be forwarded to board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption.
Do we need clarity on those dates in there? Are those correct?
There's a typo, I think, in your recommendation.
Before we vote on it, can we maybe get that cleared up?
This is a typo.
Good catch. Just read the corrected areas. You don't have to read the whole thing.
The corrected area is number 2, that's subject to the adoption of CVRD bylaw number 4628, unsightly premises and abandoned property bylaw 2025, CVRD bylaw number 4647, bylaw offense notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2025, be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption.
Do we have a mover? Do we have a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. That will go to next Wednesday's board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Brisky, R8, what do you got for us? No, now you are.
There we
yes.
go. Hello, Mr. Chair, directors. First, the 2 reports here. The first report is regarding a bit of a response to the correspondence we received from the Cowichan Bay Waterworks District. We'd received some correspondence from them regarding the moratorium on their new water connections. So there was some questions throughout the community and from yourselves about just how my division might handle a building permit application where a developer or property owner chose to bypass an improvement district or a water purveyor and drill their own well. I had to rely pretty heavily on a lot of my colleagues to put this report together. It's fairly technical, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it, if there are any.
Questions for Mr. Brisky? Director Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sonny. If I get this correctly, if a developer or anyone wants to drill their own well, they have to apply to the province for a well permit, and that process can take some considerable time. So if they want to bypass something, they would have to go and get a permit first of all. Is that correct?
Would that be in a property that's not already served by a larger sort of waterworks utility? My understanding through the chair, Director Wilson, is that private domestic wells that are serving just single private domestic dwelling units, those can just proceed. It's more where the water is being used for other purposes or for a larger number of dwelling units that there's multiple pieces of legislation that are applicable to water in the province, and in those cases, one or more of them would be triggered.
Okay, thank you.
Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brisky, just for clarity, a building permit, we're talking about a dwelling, something that somebody has to live in, not an accessory building. If somebody wants to put water into an accessory building.
Could you elaborate, Director Abbott, please?
No bedroom. They do not plan on residing, but it might be a barn that needs water. They're going to build a barn. And the area is served by an improvement district.
Mr. Brisky.
Sure. So through the chair to you, Director Abbott, in that case, like that doesn't warrant a new connection, right? Like that use is sort of accessory to the connection that already exists. We haven't established an additional dwelling unit or anything. It's sort of presumed that the user is the same person in their accessory building as would be in the dwelling. So, and your local improvement district, my understanding is that their local bylaws wouldn't require an additional connection in that regard.
If I may, a follow-up. If there's a dormant well that has not been used for some time on said property, can they reactivate that well?
Through the chair to you, Director Abbott, I think that would probably warrant a little bit further of investigation and really getting sort of into specifics. Wells, there are a lot of old wells, and a lot of folks use them for irrigation purposes and things like that. Certainly what the improvement districts and our own waterworks folks don't want is for there to be any sort of interconnection and cross-contamination. That would be contrary to the bylaws that we have and that they have. But understanding what the use of that water is and how it's connected would be very relevant to a discussion of that kind.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, information item only. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, didn't see you there. Oh, go ahead. Oh, hang on, something happened there. Go ahead, Director
I
Nicholson.
just want to clarify, so we have a minimum parcel size for you to have a well?
I think I might need a little bit of help here, Director Nicholson. Miss Pressman kind of helped me out with that part of the report.
Ms. Pressman, what do you got? Your seat 27, go for it.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, I think you're referring to the section of the report that refers to minimum parcel size in the zoning bylaw, and so that would be for subdivision purposes, that there's different parcel sizes, minimum parcel sizes, depending on whether or not you're connected to a water system or not.
Right, so that in effect,
But it wouldn't come into effect at the time of building, for instance, the minimum parcel size, only for subdivision.
I'm just thinking about when we have water scarcity issues, moving forward, is there an opportunity to think about our comprehensive zoning bylaw in terms of helping to minimize creating water problems with wells? Because it is true that you can have a well and all you need to do, and you are advised to register with it with the province to use for domestic purposes, right? But you don't have to get a license unless you're using it for commercial purposes. So, yeah, as we get more and more concerned about water and how much water is being used and what it's being used for, and yeah, we should be thinking about that in terms of our zoning, maybe. Maybe that's a tool that we could use.
Ms. Pressman?
Through the chair, that is something we will consider in the zoning, minimum parcel size for use. As well, I think one of the components mentioned in the report is that we did add a requirement in our works and services bylaw for the construction of suites, for instance, to confirm the water servicing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I guess my point is you don't want people to bypass improvement district water systems on lots that are too small to have a safe well. And also, they're also pulling water out of the system that you don't get to measure, which is a problem too. But I'm sort of assuming that won't happen.
Mr. Brisky.
Through the chair to you, Director Nicholson, I think that's sort of the global issue that the province is moving towards solving, and like you say, having people register their wells. Like, we don't want, one person drinking up everybody else's water or anything like that, certainly. And I think, in my observation of relevant legislation is sort of baby steps towards that goal, and I hazard a guess that likely in the future, those private domestic residential wells, there probably will be a requirement to register them, but there's a bit of a transition period to sort of break the population in.
Seeing no further comment, thank you for that, Mr. Brisky. R9, building inspection first quarter report for information. Mr. Brisky, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, my second report for information here is the first quarter report for building permits issued and received in 2025. Again, I'm available for any questions.
Seeing none. Next item.
Thank you.
Bylaw enforcement, where 4% were unsightly premises.
I noticed there wasn't a lot happening here.
R10, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have a report regarding Q1 bylaw enforcement, and I am here for questions.
Director Martman.
Thank you once again for these reports. They're informative. I noticed this is the first time I think I saw the coastal animal park, or where they go to the different parks. I'm interested in why that was added, and I'll just make an observation now that they don't go past Ladysmith.
Through the chair to Director Martman, to answer your first question, is actually they have been included before, and they have been part of the package. Yeah, so we that's something that they typically report on a month-to-month basis. Unfortunately, for this quarter, when at the time of preparation when we were doing it, I believe they didn't have the March report ready to go yet. And I too did notice that the park patrols lacked Area H, so I reached out to our contractor to inquire why. Essentially they said people must be responsible dog owners in Area H. They're not up there a lot. They'll typically tie in and patrol with a call for service or a known hotspot where dogs off leash are an issue. However, the conversation we've had today, they're preparing a list of parks in Area H, and they're going to do some proactive impromptu patrolling of some of those parks. But overall, they said that Area H has really good dog owners and dogs.
All right.
But you will see it in the future.
I love that. Keep saying that. Thanks.
Just on that point, in CVRD Area E, you've got Bright Angel Park, Curry Park, No Glenora Trailhead Park, which is one of our big parks, and I can't remember where Wilmot Park is.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, I don't recall where Wilmot Park is either, but Glenora Trails Head, I know it is typically a spot that they do drop by. But if there's no recording of any kind of patrol there, I guess they didn't deem it to be a hot spot. But I will talk to them about just exercising some regular patrolling through all parks, whether it's a hot spot or not, to have that presence.
Seeing no one else, and it's an information item only. Ms. Ferguson, what do we got to do next? You're going to read something out for us, aren't you?
Question period.
Question period. I'd like to welcome anyone that would like to pose a question to the chair to please come forward now. Question period is an opportunity to offer the public to ask a question regarding the business of the CVRD. It allows for a 50-minute allotment and is comprised of two parts. First, reserved for directly to agenda items. If there's time remaining, questions may be a matter of public interest related to and in the CVRD jurisdiction. Each questioner is permitted to ask one question plus follow-up question related to the answer. The question must truly be a question, not a statement of opinion or speech. We request that your question is presented in a friendly and respectful manner. Your cooperation in maintaining a safe, respectful, and orderly environment is greatly appreciated. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm thinking you may have something for me as well. Last ESE promised to answer a question.
I thought I had, but I guess I'm going to have to put that on my list for a second follow-up.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the discussion around the comprehensive zoning bylaw, it is my understanding that as a member of an advisory planning commission, that the advisory planning commissions offer recommendations to the ESC and ultimately the board, not provide direction. Is that true?
They provide responses and advice to the board, the committee, the staff, and the director, yes.
Thank you, but not direction. Recommendations, there's a distinction.
Fair enough, sure.
Thank you. And I would hate to see this very large project delayed any longer. It is possible to have a zoning amendment and not require an OCP amendment as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. On the bylaw enforcement, in reference to the item that was brought up about rats on a property, I can say that I've had personal experience with this. A property adjacent to us had an outbuilding that was not maintained. It was infested with rats. The new owner came in, took down the building, which was great, but the rats have to go somewhere, and they ended up at our place, and we needed to get an exterminator at great cost to us. So rats are an issue in buildings and abandoned buildings, and I think it shouldn't fall to the neighbors to have to bear that cost. So maybe that could be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Are there any further questions for the chair? Seeing none, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to have a motion to go back into closed under Section 91C, F, G, I, and K.
Moved, seconded, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? I think we're going to take